Okay, good morning again.
Morning.
Okay, so when you get to a Spiritist center and you get over here and say life goes on, everybody's like, so what? It's no news at all, right? Of course. It's not the same way for different belief systems. The purpose here today is to go beyond the life goes on. It's what's behind it? How does it happen? What is this thing about life goes on in a different sphere, in a different dimension? So we want to go through these things. As we go along speaking, we're going to talk about these things that you see here on the screen, different belief systems, what they see, what we see, of course, how do we compare with them. Obviously, we're going to talk about the Spiritist codification, and for us, what it means to be dead or death. Okay, so that's the whole general purpose of today's talk. In 2003, one very knowledgeable and known, very well-known group made a research, and they wanted, the great question was, do you believe in life after death? Okay, because of the results of that, they decided to do a second research, which is this, and the big question was, do you believe in heaven and hell, or hell? And that is in our society. That's not in a Spiritist center. So you get all types of people, of type of belief systems, and the results were a little bit striking, at least from what they expected. Because you see here, 76% of people believe in hell, in heaven, 71% in hell. So there are some people that believe in one, not the other, and there are people that believe in both. And it's a little bit of strange that some people believe in one and not the other. So the next question was, okay, you're telling me you believe in hell, you're telling me you believe in hell, in heaven. So the next question was, define heaven. Because it could be different. That could be the problem. The problem could be the interpretation of the word heaven, the word hell. So in the same people, okay, so in defining heaven, look what they found. 46% of the people, about literally half of the people, they believe in some sort of divinity, God, whatever name you want, because it depends on the belief system, but some sort of divinity, okay, something all the way above. 30% believe that heaven is just a resting place with no connection to any divinity or anything like that. 14% believe it's just a name, it's just symbolism, it doesn't really exist. 5% say there is no life after death, for those who believe in heaven, right? And 5% don't know. And similarly, they ask, well, define hell then. And here's what we get. 39%, so a little less than heaven, 39% believe there's no divinity in this supposedly heaven, okay? 32% believe it's a place for torments, and that's what you're gonna feel, physical torments and everything like that. 30% compared to 14% believe it's just a name, it's just symbolism, and 16% don't know. So that's completely strange, because you can tell how diverse human thought is around life and death, heaven and hell. And if we look into a second research, which is this, is there life after death? This is divided by country, and it's sorted by yes, we have a soul, okay? So you see, countries were in the Eastern civilization, most of these people, we believe in a soul. But if you look on the right side, is there life after death? You can believe in a soul, but not that there's life after death. It's possible. So if you look, for example, on the last one here, Russia, 37% and 67%, these are very low numbers. Us here in the US, 96% of us believe there's a soul, but only 86% believe there's life after death. So these numbers, when we take a quick look, they tell us how, how difficult it is for everybody to think and see the same way. So every time we talk about death in our society, in our daily activities, we know people who die, family members, people in other families that we are somehow close to. Depending on the belief systems, they're going to see this in a way or another. But in general, the words are not very good. In general, it's a very negative thing. It's things like feeling of pain, defeat, in a medical profession especially. humiliation because you lost a life. You're operating on somebody, that somebody dies, and it's the general feeling. It's a difficult feeling for the doctors and nurses and people. But you know, it brings that sensation of humiliation, and we could go words and words and words here, but in general the words are very negative. And then Allan Kardec takes all of this that we spoke, and he tries to understand why. Why do we see life's death in such a negative way? Obviously he is being helped by the spirits, and then in the book What is Spiritism, which is a second book he wrote just after the Spirits book, and he's explaining to people who wrote to him complaining and attacking him. So he's generally answering questions and letters. And in this book he addresses that, and this is what it says: the body's death frees the spirit from the envelope that it had bound to the earth and made it suffer. So overall, so far, it looks like a good thing, different than what we saw before, and the research shows us. And this is written 150 years ago. Once freed of this burning, it processes only its ethereal body. So there is another body that continues on. That's the life goes on thing, which allows it to travel through space and everything. So he's trying to tell us that when the physical body that we know dies, that's not really the end of it. Okay, that he's addressing these to people who were outside the belief system. They didn't know Spiritism at all. And he continues later on in 1865 on the book Heaven and Hell. He's trying to explain why we are so afraid of death. And here's what they say: to worry about death, therefore, arises from the fact that we don't have enough knowledge about it. That's basically what he's saying. If we knew more, we wouldn't probably be so afraid of. Just like everything else, everything that we don't know exactly, we are prone to be more afraid. If we have to do something new today that we never did before, yeah, we're going to be a little bit, maybe, wow, should I do this? Am I going to be able to? How is this thing? So it puts us out of our comfort zone. So the problem that we all in general have with death is it's kind of outside the comfort zone. If we are able to bring death and the understanding of it into our comfort zone, things change. And that's what the whole Spiritist literature is about, basically. How to bring this into our comfort zone. Spiritism comes as a sequence of events in which the first one is the first revelation when Moses brings us the 10 Commandments. But this is kind of an imposition. Because can you imagine Moses presenting us with the 10 Commandments when we have no knowledge whatsoever to discuss and understand any of these things? Don't kill. For them it's absurd because they used to kill every day. So it had to bring this absolutism behind it. It's something that was imposed. In current words, we could say it's something like Moses was like a dictator, if you will, in modern language. But this puts death as a synonym of punishment. So I die because I'm being punished. That's what we meaning us in those days, extracted from the first revelation. And the first revelation takes place, Judaism starts, and it goes on and on and on. Jesus comes along with a different tone. He's no longer bringing the tone of absolutism. He's bringing a tone of counseling. He's counseling people. I would do this, I wouldn't do that. He didn't he didn't force anybody to do anything. He didn't do anything that would hurt people. He would counsel people. I wouldn't go this way, I would go that way. So that puts death in a slightly different tone. Death becomes associated more with renovation. He's going to teach us that death is going to be a way of renewing yourself. In his dialogue with Nicodemus, that's what he's trying to understand. You're going to born again. And he goes, what do you mean born again? I can't do that. I can't go back to my mother's body and so and so. But he's trying to explain that death is going to bring a new experience where I can be different. And then Spiritism comes along in 1857, and the general tone is completely different. It's more liberating because, just like we saw, if death frees up the body, frees up the spirit from the body, so it gets out of prison. And that changes the whole understanding of death from renovation to evolution, which is even more. So these are three different levels of consciousness, completely different. You know, I was being punished before, and now, no, that's not really what it is. I'm just progressing. But it's hard to understand this. It's hard for us. It still is today in certain ways, in certain things, going through a difficult society full of wars and full of different problems. There are new problems are rising every day. So it's still very complicated for us to deal with this. So we saw that the concept of death throughout times, it changed. There's sort of an evolution about the concept. The angle that we see death changed a little bit. So let's just detail that a little bit more. We'll start with the Old Testament when death is punishment. And then Judaism starts. The Jews are conquered, or they have to live under the pagans now when the Roman Empire takes over. And those are two different cultures, two different belief systems, because the pagans didn't believe in one single God. They believed in different gods, and God of the earth and the sun and different things. And that was completely against the standard beliefs that the Jews had. And they had to kind of live under both. It was very complicated. From these things, the idea of heaven and hell is created, because the pagans were very prone to hell. Everything that the gods do, it's raining because God is mad. The thunder is because God is mad. So everything is very negative. Everything is wrong. So they tend to promote, I would say, the general idea of hell. We're living towards hell, all of us. Okay. It's going to go back. It's going to go back. And then throughout times, we go into a different way of things, where the church now detains the power, at least they think they do, and they create this idea of heaven and hell, and they say, this is a great concept. I can use this to force people to follow what I believe is right, which is the dogma from the church. And then the Inquisition takes this general idea of, again, back to death is punishment. You're going to die under the fire because you're being punished. And the punishment is you're not following what I tell you to. And because of the general behavior of the church, materialism is born, because everything is a dogma. Everything cannot be questioned. A dogma is something you cannot question. A dogma is not something that you can ask. A dogma is not something that you bring to a table to discuss. That's out of questions. That's what a dogma is. So believers were disbelieving that belief system. Believers were asking questions, and the answer was, we don't question that. We don't ask that. And that is exactly what triggers a whole different avenue called materialism. Then later on, science, because of the knowledge that we have, the Industrial Revolution, the late 1800s, the early 1800s starts to grow, and we go into a more scientific approach where there is no space for such a thing as God or religion, spirit, nothing like that. And it's all matter. It's all based on matter. Isaac Newton wants to study the planets, not life in the planets. It's a different approach. And with Charles Darwin responding to all the questions that the church couldn't answer, he wins the title of provider of the truth. So church loses its standard as a provider of the truth, and that changes hands to the science. Today, science is the provider of the truth. If we don't know anything, we'll, what is science saying? So it is today the provider of the truth. And it starts right here. And then later on, we have Spiritism, which is going to give a totally different tone into this thing of heaven and hell, life and death. From these four first things here, okay, if we look at them, can we define life and death? No. Can we, where does one stop and the other starts? It's complicated, right? If you go by the standard created by the church, we're going to have a materialist definition of life and death. If we go by the science standards, we're going to have a scientific definition. And if we go by Spiritism, we're going to have the Spiritist definition, and they're totally different. They're three different things, completely different. In one extreme, we have materialism. In the other extreme, we have Spiritism. As we saw, they are completely different things. And where is the difference? Where is the difference? Why are we so different from the materialist line of thought in regards to this? It has to do with the perennial questions. The perennial questions are things like this. I listed 7 of them. These are the 7 most common ones. Who am I? What am I doing here? Where am I going? You know, things like this. So let's try to see how these people are answering. These 2 groups of thoughts are answering. So question number 1, who am I? The materialist is going to say, I'm a body, I'm 70 trillion cells. That's what it's going to say. This is it. We're going to say, not really, we are an immortal spirit. That's a different consciousness level. Question number 2, where did I come from? For science, I came from my parents. That's it. I have a DNA, which is consequence of my parents' DNAs. I get 23 chromosomes from one, 23 from the other. This is who I am. For us, I am, where did I come from? Spirit world. I am a spirit. I just have a physical body right now. How should I behave? Once I'm here, how should I behave? Science is going to say, well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter. You're 70 trillion cells. So whatever you want to do, you do. There's no point in doing this way or that way. For us, it's different. How should I behave? Christ consciousness, because it's going to matter down the road. Because the body dies, but the spirit stays. Where am I going? For science, you're going back to Earth. We're going to go back and be powder. Go back to nature. For us, we're going to go back to the spirit world to continue our life, our evolution, our progress. Okay, death. And now? What happens now? For science, and now what? Because for them, it doesn't make any sense. And now what? I don't have anything else to say. You're dead, you're dead. For us is, no, I'm going to go to an errant state where I'm going to learn, I'm going to review what I did, and I'm going to replan my future actions and my future life. Question number 6, what do I take with me when I die? Science, nothing. You don't take anything. The car stays in the garage, the laptop stays on the desk, you know, the chair stays in the living room. You don't take anything. For us, yes, I do take. I take my experiences, I take my knowledge, and I append those to what I had before. I append the new knowledge to the knowledge I had before. I append my experiences to the ones I brought in before I started this life, and so and so and so. And last question, how is it to die? And for science is, well, it doesn't matter. It's the same thing for everybody. Everybody dies. Okay, the cells stop working, that's it, you're dead. For us, no, it depends on my level of evolution. So this process, this death per se, could be more complicated or less complicated. It could be easy, smooth, or it could be very hard, very bumpy. And that's what we want to see in a little bit. So the materialistic point of view has some things that make them not understand us completely, because they see everything in one life. In one life, we can't, there's no point in progressing, because that's not going to use for anything if there's only one life. There's no visibility beyond this one life. There is no other life. There is no continuation per se. It all breaks at the last day, and that's it. So they see happiness as material possessions, because if it's everything is in one lifetime, happiness is what I can get in this one lifetime. So everything is very material, is very oriented towards gathering matter as much as I can. As many cars as I can, as many iPods as I can, as many gadgets as I can. And there is no understanding whatsoever on divine justice, because that would require a next life. That would require something else later on that's going to offset the past, and there is no such a thing in their view. This is the materialistic view. So we have 3, materialistic definition, a scientific definition, and us. The scientific definition is very strange, because the very first thing we would think is, oh, they don't believe it. That would be the very initial thought. When you go to investigate what science, not materialism, what science is telling us, it is very well summarized in this book by Dr. Dana Zora. She's a British writer. She is a scientist that with time she started to study and became a whole career in philosophy. So today she writes a lot of articles bridging both. And she wrote a book. This is the book here, The Quantum Self. In this book, this is what she says, this one phrase here, this comes from science, okay? At the subatomic level of elementary particles, there is no death because there is no loss. That's very interesting. So that's science telling us that death is not really death, it's transformation. This is a scientific statement, okay? So that's how they see it. They don't see as death, as something that stops and never exists and ceases existing. That's not what they see anymore. Maybe in the past, not now. Quantum physics is changing, and will change a lot of other things, and too fast. Now us, what's our point of view? How do we see this? We come here, we incarnate, we go through a full-blown lifetime. It's time to stop, okay? Go to an errant state to review my things, what I did wrong, what I did right, what I can do better, and so and so and so. Then I come back to another life, and so and so and so, and this is a cycle. What we want to find out is right there, what happens right there in the transition point. So if we can zoom this transition point, death is not punctual as much as incarnation is not punctual. It's a process. Starts in conception, goes all the way through about 7 years of age. So it is a process. Death is a process. It starts at a certain point, which is hard to define, by the way, and it goes through a process and it stops at another point, which is again hard to define. So when I try to look into this process, there are two views. A view from this side, us leaving, and a view from that side, us arriving. And they're different. The thing is different. It's not the same for everyone. On this side, on our side, there's something that we call death. Okay? On this side, there is no death. There's something they call discarnation. And these are not the same. Not necessarily they are the same points. If we expand this process line here to study a little bit more, so death now is all the way up there, that's our vision. Discarnation is all the way up here, that's their vision. What happens in between? We got to go back in time to understand what happens. If you go back to the cavemen, okay, when would we consider somebody dead in those days? Probably the guy just dropped down. Okay, he's not moving. Oh, it's taking too long for him to move. He's not breathing. So breathing is what defines this guy is dead or not. And breathing by visual standards, the breast is moving or not moving. So that would be considered that this guy dropped there and he's not doing anything. Well, time goes by, things get better. Then we understand there's a heart and a whole system of things inside the body. And we were able to understand that the heart is the key of everything later on. And if the heart's not beating, if I put my ear on somebody's heart, lying on the floor, and I don't hear anything, I will consider this guy dead. Well, that's nice, but that's a long time ago. Things change. Then we got equipment, we got stethoscope, where the doctor, even if I don't hear anything with my ears, he can put some instrument, the stethoscope, on somebody's chest, and he'll capture the beats that I can't with my bare ears. So that kind of prolonged life a little bit more. You see how it's becoming complicated to define death with time? It was very easy. The guy dropped dead, he's dead. Not anymore. It's getting complicated. Now we got to an ECG, electrocardiogram, where the doctor can't hear anymore with the stethoscope, but you put 6 electrodes in here, and a piece of paper and pens are showing me, no, there's still activity in there. He's not dead. So it's taken a lot longer for this guy to die than before. It's getting more complicated, more complex. After the ECGs, we got the EKGs, the electroencephalograms. And that's even more complicated because now the heart is dead. You don't see anything anymore. But when the electrodes are up here, there's energy. It's still showing some sort of energy. And then he's not dead yet. Wow, it's taken a long time for this guy to die compared to old standards. And now, how do we define deaths today? By the standards of the provider of the truth, who is science, okay? It's what we call brain dead. Brain dead means everything, the encephalus and the brain, there's no activity whatsoever. This is the point where we can do like organ transplants. So this is, for scientific standards, what defines brain death. But there's a problem, and science is dealing with that. It's called near-death experience, where we do stuff like this. On an operating room, we, let's say, print a picture, or we put a magazine. We put a magazine facing up somewhere that nobody can see from below. None of the nurses, doctors, nobody, because it's way up, and it's facing up. There's a picture, let's say the cover of the magazine is facing up. So surgery goes on, and for scientific standards, the guy's dead. Nurses and doctors try to revive the man or the person, and so, and they're finally able to. And the guy comes back to life. He comes back to tell us there was a magazine with this picture. Wow. And now science can explain that. So the provider of the truth is not really explaining everything that we know. So you see, death and discarnation are getting very close now. Science, the provider of the truth, is coming close to this side. Things are getting mixed. So there's still a difference between what death is for science standards and for us, discarnation. There's still a difference, but the gap is very small now, and the gap is going to be offset by quantum physics, which is going to be able to explain us everything. But it's a nice view of putting everything together and seeing, you know, the evolution of the concept of death. The concept of death today is not the same as in the past. If you go to the Medline Plus Dictionary, which is the most used medical dictionary in the world, and if you query, it's a dictionary, okay? If you query the word life, this is what you get. I'm sorry, if you query the word death, this is what you get. Which I think it's okay. Most people would not argue. The irreversible cessation of all vital functions, especially as indicated by permanent stoppage of the heart, respiration, brain activity, the end of life. For most people, regardless of belief system, this is okay. This is acceptable. All right, so let's see what, from the same dictionary, what is life? Life, the quality that distinguishes a vital and functional plant or animal from a dead body. That didn't really say anything. That is telling me I don't know how to define life. That's what this says. I don't know, so I'm putting some words together to fill up the dictionary. And why can't science, this is a scientific dictionary, why can't science define life? Because life is not material. Life is not a walking body. It's a lot more than that. They can't define because of that. Now, life and death come together. One is right after the other. If I can't define life, I can't define death. I can't. So science can't define death. You saw the difficulty in defining death. Where does it die? No, near-death experience. Is it dead? Is it not? You see, and Emmanuel, Spirit Emmanuel tells us exactly this. They can't be separated. It's a quick sequence of events. It's like night and day. We can establish a reasonable reference. Let's say 6 p.m. is the transition point. But not really, because at 8:30, you got sun out there in certain places. So we can assign standards for us to discuss. It works at a vocabulary level, but not at what it is. These things cannot be separated. That's very clear by Emmanuel. And we see that happen. So this is the analysis from the point of view who are discarnate, who are us, our point of view. Okay? Now, how about them? How do they see this process? Okay? How do they see us coming in? Okay? And there's a very interesting passage in the book, The Workers of the Eternal Life, Life Eternal actually, and where Spirit Andrea Luiz is part of an expedition, and what they do is the group goes to help several people discarnate. They're going to be there to just help the spirit liberate from the body and so on and so on. So he narrates several experiences. I'm going to take one of these which is a person by the name Cavalcanti, and he's about to discarnate, and the group goes in to, you know, make it easier for him, the transition. And so before he actually narrates the events, André Luiz tells us a little bit about this guy as a person during his lifetime, and I put some bullets here so we can see. So who is him? He was a very religious guy. By the way, his best friend is a priest. In his early days, he devoted his whole life and his whole time to the church, so he kind of abandoned his family, and he is very regretful about that. Today mean by the time he's about to die. So that's something that's a guilt that he carries all over many years, because he at one point felt he didn't do the right thing. He devoted his time to the church. His wife just left him, because actually all the relatives, they left him because he says, you're not paying attention to any of us. We don't want to be with you anymore. So he had kind of a challenging life in that way. But his problem is, he's got an unresolved guilt with his ex-wife because of this. She left him because he wasn't paying attention to her. So this is what André Luiz tells us in general about this man in his life as a priest and so. Okay, so what happens from the physical level during the process? There are two levels that we're going to see, right? One is the physical level, what happens in the physical realm, and what happens from the other side. What is André Luiz seeing that we don't see from here? So in the physical level, I just listed some bullets here so we can follow. He is he's in a hospital because his digestive system is totally compromised. He's supposed to go through several surgeries, and you know, they're not really bringing any result, but he's supposed to take a last surgery per se, and he's very attached to the flesh. So he's suffering a lot because he doesn't want to let go, and he's very attached. And he keeps insisting to his best friend, also a priest, that he asked this priest to bring his wife over to the hospital because he wants to apologize. You see, the guilt is there for many years. So the surgery is going to take place, but before this, you know, he's losing it. And the doctors and the nurses, they see he's suffering a lot. So from the doctor's point of view, he believes he's doing the right thing. He wants to give him a lethal injection, so the guy stops suffering.